All right, Dave asks, in regard to the Enlightenment, how did an intellectual movement fundamentally about reason, individual rights, and responsibility grow up in a sea of universal collectivist thought? It's astonishing when you think about it. It is, but you also can't think about it as an isolated thing. It's not like, boom, one day there was an Enlightenment, right? And suddenly, I don't know, John Locke and Isaac Newton, and they came out of nowhere, right? And suddenly these ideas of individual rights and reason came out of... No, this is a long process, starting with Thomas Aquinas, right? Of slowly reason being, initially logic and reason being captured by the Catholic Church and being integrated over there, but then the Renaissance and the discovery of more of Aristotle's writing and art that suddenly reflects these ideas of individualism. I mean, again, I always refer to this, but think of Michelangelo's David as an expression of, here's an individual, a particular individual, not the kind of Middle Ages art where they all look the same. This guy looks different, and he's a hero, which is an individualistic characteristic, being a hero. So the Enlightenment is the culmination of an intellectual cultural process that began with Aquinas, but really hit its stride in the Renaissance. Even intellectually, I mean, you have people writing. Even Machiavelli is already thinking in terms that are first of all secular. They're not religious. They're not purely religious. He's thinking about politics and what does power mean in politics and how is power attained, but what is the purpose of power? He's got a lot of... His ideas are wrong, but he's thinking about these things. He's bringing them out in the open. It's not just about whatever God says. Now you've got a guy sitting there and trying to figure it out, trying to think about it. You've got Galileo, you've got Kepler, you've got Copernicus, you've got a tradition leading up to Newton. Newton doesn't just come out of nowhere. Locke doesn't come out of nowhere. Indeed, in Amsterdam, there are thinkers that predate Locke in terms of talking about rights. They don't quite get it right, not as right as Locke does. Pupendorf and I forget the other guy, but there's a number of these thinkers in the Netherlands in particular. And you've got Spinoza, who comes a little before these guys, right? And whose writings are banned and who's, super secular. That's why he's being banned. And you could argue maybe he hints at maybe a morality that is certainly a morality that's not altruistic, maybe kind of egoistic, but is only hinting at it. And so you've got a period of 200-300 years leading up to Locke and Newton, where science is being taken seriously, where science is being investigated. And if you read about how this all develops, the printing press, suddenly people are reading books, suddenly more people are reading books, suddenly they're publishers who have an incentive to sell books and distribute books. And more people are reading, more and more people are getting engaged, more and more people now. You can write a book on science. Galileo's books on science have huge distributions. People are interested in them, particularly in the North. That is not it's not under the Pope, and it's not, the Inquisition is not there, and so there is a whole cultural dynamic leading. And if you add to that the fact that by certainly the beginning of the 18th century, Europe is sick of wars. It's sick of Catholics and Protestants slaughtering each other. They've just gone through maybe the bloodiest war in human history. It's hard to tell, but on a per capita basis, the 30-Year War was unbelievably brutal. More brutal in terms of per capita deaths than World War I or World War II, right? 30-Year War. And they were sick of it. Over what? Nobody really knew, right? At the end, it was a religious war, but it was also a war for power. It was a war between a variety of different lineages of kings, who would rule over what, who would dominate Europe. But so they were sick of violence. They had been, individualism was on the rise, partially because of the arts of the Renaissance. I mean, it's not just Michelangelo's David. I mean, even people don't understand what's special about the Mona Lisa, right? You go to the Louvre and you see, just like 1,000 people are looking at the Mona Lisa, and you kind of peek above them and you see this painting in the background, and everybody, but what's unique about it? What's special about it? Well, one of the things that's special about it is that this is a period in which in these paintings, people have individual character. And people talk about this little sly smile that the Mona Lisa has. She has this at the edge of her mouth. She has a little smile. And it's a painting expressing emotions. You don't see that if you go 100 years back, if we go 50 years before that. So there is, put aside the perspective and everything else that's associated with the painting, there's a character, there's emotion, there's individualism in the painting. And you see that in some of the paintings by Raphael. You certainly see it in the sculptures of Michelangelo. In Michelangelo's there's elements of the romantic, there's elements of choice, there's certainly emotion in his dying slaves. It might not be a positive emotions, but there's a real emotional character. Leonard Peikoff and I think Marianne Sears, although Marianne Sears' lectures were never taped, but have talked about the power of Michelangelo's dying slave. It's an individual with a soul, with a character that's different, and who is suffering, and that you care about this particular individual suffering. Right? So it's individualism is definitely on the rise throughout the Renaissance and the Baroque and into the Enlightenment, into the 18th century. So you can't view it as coming out of nowhere. It is a slow progression of intellectual, and then you get, if you will, the miracle in quotes of the Enlightenment is that so many geniuses appear all at one time. Now, my contention would be that they're always geniuses, and the reason you sometimes you know about them, sometimes you don't, because if you're in a subsistence farming economy and everybody just farms from sunrise to sunset, and their genius never manifests itself, or they're killed by the people around them because nobody wants to deal with them, or because they're disruptive to society, or the tribe doesn't like them because they're challenging authority, or they're challenging tradition, or they're challenging something, they're burned at the stake. But if you think about the 18th century and the number of just brilliant geniuses that come about writing and engage in stuff, it's amazing. But that's partially because this is a period of relative freedom, but it's a period of relative freedom because of everything that came before that has led intellectually to intellectuals being left alone. So the Catholic Church is now muted. It's not as powerful. The Protestants are basically generally willing to leave people alone because they've rejected this authoritarianism of the Catholicism. They've adopted a different form of authoritarianism, of a king, but the king is less powerful than the church was in terms of his authority particularly over spiritual matters, right? So again, there's been this political, cultural, aesthetic transition from the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, leading into the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is the culmination of the Renaissance, and it's the culmination of Aristotelian thinking. Of course, all this relies on the rediscovery of Aristotle.
And to begin with, I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize, I know this is difficult, can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute, that man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it, and that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
All right. All right.
Now, may I define what my morality is?
All right.
Because this is merely an introduction. My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people, nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
May I?
All right, before we go on, reminder, please like the show. We've got 163 live listeners right now, 30 likes. That should be at least 100. I figure at least 100 of you actually like the show. Maybe there are like 60 of the Matthews out there who hate it. But at least the people who are liking it, you know, I want to see a thumbs up. There you go. Start liking it. I want to see that go to 100. All it takes is a click of a thing, whether you're looking at this. And you know, the likes matter. It's not an issue of my ego. It's an issue of the algorithm. The more you like something, the more the algorithm likes it. So, you know, and if you don't like the show, give it a thumbs down. Let's see your actual views being reflected in the likes. But if you like it, don't just sit there. Help get the show promoted. Of course, you should also share. And you can support the show at JeronBrooksShow.com/support, or on Patreon or Subscribestar or Locals, and show your support for the work, for the value hopefully you're receiving from this. And of course, don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, even if you just come here to troll, or even if you're here like Matthew to defend Marx, then you should subscribe, because that way you'll know when to show up. You'll know what shows are on, when they're on. You'll get notified, right? So, yes, like, share, subscribe, support. Like, share, subscribe, support. There you go. Easy. Do one or all of those, please.